With predictions of a dry summer following lots of spring growth, the threat of a bad bushfire season in Victoria is very real. Yet more than a year after the Bushfires Royal Commission recommended that high-risk areas have refuges for people to flee to, there's still only one in the whole state. As Stephanie March reports, it's unlikely many others will be ready for at least another year.
Woods Point is nestled in the heart of the Yarra Ranges. It takes more than an hour to drive there from Marysville along a narrow, winding, unpaved road. Its setting is its best feature, but also its most dangerous.
You can't guarantee anything, but as I said, when it hits the fan, I'd rather be in there than out here.
This old mine shaft, a relic from the gold boom, is the only official fire refuge left in Victoria.
We'll put the other blanket up here to create the airlock.
The old mine tunnel, or adit as the locals call it, is about 50 metres long.
I think we could probably get 100 people in here, straight up, and we could probably squeeze quite a few more in. You wouldn't turn anyone away. If they come, we'd make room.
The community stocks it with supplies like food and water at the start of every fire season.
I want a good bolt hole to go down when I have to go, and that's what it's here for.
When fire ripped through Woods Point in 1939, locals say people survived by sheltering in the town's adit. It was almost used again in 2006 when fires rushed through the nearby valley.
Luckily, everyone lends a hand here. So.
Ken Dwight personally believes every town in a high fire risk community should have a shelter like it.
I think it's a necessity. And I've got a lot of experience in bushfires over the past 20 or so years.
When Black Saturday struck almost 3 years ago, there were 9 official refuges in Victoria. 8 have since been decommissioned because the council responsible was unwilling or unable to maintain them. The Bushfire Royal Commission's final report, released in July last year, recommended that community refuges be more readily available and that the government prioritise establishing them in areas where bushfire risk is high. The state government this week released its long-awaited fire refuges policy.
They're not the answer to everything. They are part of a series of messages of how people should protect themselves and survive. And we still go back and say on extreme and code red days, the best option for people, the safest option is to leave.
The policy hinges on a pilot refuge being established and tested before more guidelines are written and more shelters built.
I would suggest they would be new style buildings. That is, that the building regulation, the performance requirements will see them be a concrete structure or similar that will withstand significant fire intensity.
A site for the pilot is still yet to be identified, and it's unlikely the shelter would be built before the start of this year's fire danger period.
I think we'll see, though, in early 2012 the pilot run, which we'll learn from, and that would allow us to position ourselves for the next year, the 2012-13 fire season that we're into, clearly having fire refuges in places where they are needed. Now, that's a risk for me to say that, but that would be the ideal position we're at.
But some communities feel the policy and the pilot has been far too long in the making. The Dandenong Ranges east of Melbourne have been ravaged by fires in the past. Today, that threat still looms large in people's minds.
Look, it's simply not practical to evacuate the sort of population that lives in the Dandenong Ranges. There's 30,000 people, half of them are spread over this side of the Dandenongs. Our major arterials are single-lane roads and they get clogged very, very quickly when there's a fire, so it's just not practical. Well, it certainly passed the radiant heat criteria.
Yarra Ranges councillor Samantha Dunn says the council surveyed 90 locations for neighbourhood safer places, but only 9 have met the necessary criteria, including this oval in Upwey. Neighbourhood Safer Places, or NSPs, are locations that the CFA and councils have identified as places people can go to as a last resort. Only half of the state's 52 high-risk fire areas will have NSPs going into this summer. Officials are keen to stress that people who seek shelter at these places of last resort will not necessarily survive a fire. Samantha Dunn believes while NSPs should play a role, refuges are still needed.
We've had a bit of a reprieve last summer. It was a very wet summer and I think we all sighed a sigh of relief up here, but we cannot guarantee that for future summers and we really need to get moving on this.
Mel Gajdek lives in Sassafras, a community in the Dandenongs that's without an NSP or a fire refuge.
People are frightened and there's still actually nothing we can really touch 3 years after all those people died.
Richie, you going to jump? Show me how you jump.
Black Saturday was an eye-opener for the Gajdek family. They now have a fire plan that involves trying to be off the mountain on high fire risk days. But Mel Gajdek knows others in the community and many visitors that come to the area may not leave. She believes the government could and should have done more to create and implement a refuges policy before now.
They know how many people will stay on high risk days. They know that it's impossible to emergency evacuate this region. So it should have been the number one priority from the very start.
While the government is making it a priority now, working out who'll be responsible for the refuges remains a challenge. The policy states funding can come from government and private sources, but the decision to establish them will remain with the local council. The Municipal Association of Victoria says it supports the pilot, but that concerns over liability have not yet been addressed in the long term.
We still have yet to resolve the issues from the owner's viewpoint in relation to their obligations and liabilities in relation to these facilities when they're constructed and operating and how you manage them and if something goes wrong in them.
They paint the flower faces.
While all these issues are ironed out, Mel Gajdek's concerns for her community won't go away.
The worry is we'll have a fire event due to bad weather and a serious emergency where people who were supposed to not be here are here and are all trying to leave at the same time and can't do so, and they are trapped in their cars with no fire refuge.